Welcome into Texans on Tap. I'm Brandon Strange with Charlie Palullo and Josh Jordan. You can read their work on sportsmat.com and follow them on X at Palullo and at Josh Jordan 975. On today's episode, we get into the latest injury updates for Houston and get ready for a Christmas Day matchup against the Ravens. Just a reminder to hit like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Click the bell for notifications so you know when new content drops, like when we go live after every game this season, including on Christmas Day. I mean, you can't even imagine how thrilled our wives are that we're working on Christmas. And if you're on the go, we're on all your favorite podcast apps. Just search Texans on Tap. Oh, hello. So we recorded this episode right before news broke that Deontay Johnson was claimed off waivers by the Texans. Unfortunately, our schedules didn't allow us to re-record the episode. Fortunately, though, we did discuss the pros and cons of the Texans claiming Johnson. We're going to leave it in because I think it still holds up, but we just wanted to add this disclaimer to save you the trouble of commenting to tell us that he's been picked up by the Texans. We do encourage you, however, to tell us whether you think it was the right move. And if you want to know which of us thought it was a good move and who didn't, keep watching. And now back to the show. Gents, the 9-6 Texans host the 10-5 Baltimore Ravens, who, like the Chiefs, have been a bane in the Texans franchise existence for seemingly the entirety of it. This was never going to be an easy matchup, but these circumstances are just shy of a worst case scenario. Depleted wide receiver core and offensive line and playing on 3 days rest. The league can spare me their feigned concern for player safety. Before we get into the preview, though, Texans lose Tank Dell for the foreseeable future to a dislocated kneecap. Ouch. Obviously, our main concern is about the health of Tank, the person, and we wish him a speedy recovery. But there are still games to be played this season and beyond, and Houston has to figure out how to run a competitive offense out there on the field. Speaking of the Ravens, news broke last week that Baltimore was planning to cut wide receiver Deontay Johnson. Teams will be able to claim him this week. I doubt Houston even gets a chance to do so, but just for the sake of argument here, do you think, given the drama that has surrounded Johnson the past few seasons, do you think Houston would or should take a flyer on him?
If I'm the Texans, I pass. The waiver process is by inverse order of record. So the Texans at 9-6, one of the worst records of playoff teams at the moment. So could well have wound up with a shot at him, but he punked out. I mean, he goes to a Baltimore team, which is good, which is the arch rival of his, 2 X's ago, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he winds up mutinying and getting kicked off the team before he even gets a crack at the Steelers. I know he's only 3 seasons away from a Pro Bowl season of more than 100 catches, more than 80 receptions in 2022. But if I'm the Texans, I'd sign Terrell Owens before I would claim Deontay Johnson.
I'd be all over him. They need talent.
T.O., I'm kidding, by the way. Don't make any phone calls.
Yeah, T.O., I think I'll pass on, but I would try and get Deontay Johnson. They need some talent in this receiver room. We saw the Texans against the Ravens last year when you didn't have Tank Dell and it was just Nico, and they couldn't do anything. They didn't even score a touchdown on offense against the Ravens last year. Now, Deontay's not really that swarm mentality type of guy, and that's probably why Charlie would pass on him. I think the Steelers kind of moved on from him when a ball was laying on the ground, a fumble, and he didn't even bother to try and dive on it. That kind of got him out of Pittsburgh. Carolina had no problem trading him. And then obviously with the Ravens, it didn't work out. But you wonder with Deontay Johnson, that Ravens wide receiver, lineup, he wasn't cracking it. He wasn't hardly playing, and he's a really good player. So you wonder if part of it was, I'm not getting on the field. I want out of here. And if he came to Houston, man, you're number 2 on the depth chart, basically. John Mechie's still banged up. We don't know what's going to happen with him this week. So, Hutchinson hasn't really shown you much. They could use some talent. Robert Woods, he's a great veteran, but he can't really run anymore. They need some more playmakers on this team. So I would at least try with Deontay Johnson. If it doesn't work out, then you just get rid of him. But I think it's worth a shot. I mean, the other guy you could maybe look at is Odell Beckham. At least I think Deontay Johnson can still play. I think it's between the ears with him. I think Beckham, his best days are behind him.
I understand the desperate times, desperate measures. And on one hand, If you claim a guy on Monday and you're playing Wednesday, well, how could he play? How could he get up to speed? I mean, football's a complicated game, but you know what? It's not neurosurgery. You could bring in Deontay Johnson or any other receiver 2 days before a game. He has no familiarity with your system. Okay, on this play, go deep, right? If you're going to bring in a guy to try to stretch the field, open up some space. The Texans, like so many teams, profess character. Deontay Johnson, for me, is punked out. It would be a no-risk claim. I don't think he would play for anybody on just 2 days, not rest, but from joining the team. So you'd be adding a guy that you have for the finale at Tennessee, a scrimmage, ostensibly, and then the playoff game. So I understand the argument why not? What could be worse at this point? I just shrug.
I'm also seeing the Chargers, the Chiefs might have interest in him. That would just
only make sense for a good team to take the shot.
Sure. And that why can't the Texans ever be that good team that takes a shot on somebody like this? Because, if he does go to a locker room like the Chiefs, but then again, that could be like the Ravens, where maybe he's not on the field as much as he would like with the Chiefs, and then he becomes a problem again. But I would like to see the Texans take a few chances here, because we know how this movie ends when it's just Nico and a bunch of guys. And the offense was a lot better last year. They're much worse this year. So, yeah, desperate times, Charlie. I'd at least check in on him.
I think it's almost a risk-free proposition at this point. We've all heard the same concerns about Diggs when Diggs got brought over about, he's going to mess with team chemistry. But in this situation, if he's an a-hole, you can just cut him again. Nothing ventured, nothing gained, as far as I'm concerned. But Charlie, while you're right that offense in general isn't neurosurgery in the NFL, it has seemingly been so for Houston. We'll get to that in a second. But let's start on defense, because Houston's defense will have their hands absolutely full with Lamar Jackson and the Ravens offense. Baltimore has averaged 30 points per game this season. What are Houston's best opportunities to minimize Baltimore's offensive threat?
The Ravens bus gets lost on the way to the stadium. I'll be curious to see how they try to defend Lamar Jackson. The general rule is, keep him in the pocket. And with the Texans pass rush tandem coming from the outside, typically in Anderson and Hunter, I understand that. But Texans are kind of soft in the interior. I mean, I think Derrick Henry can gash them. I mean, he's done it for years, and now he's part of a better offense. It's just such a 1-2 punch. I mean, Josh Allen is odds on to win MVP, and I get it. The Bills are 12-3. Josh Allen's having a sensational season. Well, Lamar Jackson's a 2-time MVP, won it last season. He's having a better season. He had 37 touchdown passes, 4 interceptions. Leads the NFL in quarterback rating. He's second only to Allen in QBR. 765 yards rushing. And then there's Henry, 5.9 yards per carry. Derrick Henry's the modern Earl Campbell with more great seasons. I mean, if he hadn't already iced his Hall of Fame spot, this season has done it for Derrick Henry. The extra game now, asterisk it, but he's 2 huge games away from a second 2,000-yard season. Unlikely to get there, but getting to face the Texans, not impossible. And you just look at their receiving package. Zay Flowers has blossomed. They have 2 tight ends who are much better than Dalton Schultz. Rashad Bateman, a late blooming first-round draft choice, he has 8 touchdown catches. They just have weaponry all over the place. The Texans' issues at safety. I question their linebackers' ability to handle 1 really good, much less 2 tight ends. Josh, cheer me up. Cheer Texans fans up. I just don't see this as a good matchup unless the Ravens, after blasting the Steelers, still are physically worse for wear in that always brutal physical Steelers-Ravens rivalry on the quick turnaround.
Okay, little ray of sunshine. The Texans are a much better team at home. We've seen that throughout the season. You saw what they did to Josh Allen. You saw what they did to Tua. Goff, 5 interceptions in that game. So the Texans they're a different team at home, but Lamar Jackson brings a different skill set that really concerns me. I'm thinking maybe you spy him with Christian Harris. He's your fastest linebacker, ran like a 4.4 at the combine. But Harris is a little dinged up with an ankle. He's limited, but I expect him to play. But maybe you do that. at least maybe the passing game, you can slow that down with Lamar. Like I mentioned, how they frustrated so many other quarterbacks this year. You look back at when they played him in the playoffs, Lamar was 152 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. So not amazing, but where he killed you was 11 rushes for 100 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns on top of that. So Lamar's the kind of guy where you can kind of frustrate him for a lot of the game, and then he can just break one off and take it to the house. He's so tough to defend. So I think they're going to have their hands full. Derrick Henry, of course, we know what he presents, even though the Texans have been pretty good against Derrick Henry in his final games here in the division, but it's a different situation. So we just got to hope the defense shows up here, because what we're seeing from the offense, it looks bad. And this is against a tough Ravens defense that they're going to have struggles running the ball.
This is a game where you could really use Alshire. Another athletic guy who's fast and could serve as a spy for Jackson. On the other side, for Houston's offense, we know the struggles. I'm not going to belabor the point here. How can the Texans hope to scratch together points against Baltimore's defense?
Baltimore statistically is an interesting profile. Josh alluded to struggling to run it. Baltimore's the number 1 run defense in the NFL. That said, they have given up a bunch through the air. 26 touchdown passes against them. They have only 9 interceptions. But they had big secondary issues earlier in the season that they have seemed to have worked through. Marlon Humphrey's gotten healthier and improved. They have a fabulous safety combination headed by Kyle Hamilton, maybe the best single safety in the game. Kyle Van Noy is more than a situational pass rusher, but he's not an every down player at this stage of his career. A double-digit sack guy. Formerly Justin out of Texas A&M, now Nnamdi Matabuke. I mean, he is a stud in the interior of the defensive line who is going to throw around interior Texans offensive linemen by the form chart in this one. CJ Stroud has to play a clean game. Stroud with 11 interceptions. I mean, not some historic number, but I jotted the list of quarterbacks this season who've thrown more interceptions than CJ Stroud. Kirk Cousins, benched. Geno Smith is Geno Smith. Baker Mayfield is Baker Mayfield, but he has 34 touchdown passes, also Baker Mayfield. Jameis Winston, journeyman in for Watson. Will Levis, Anthony Richardson, the 2 crappy passing quarterbacks of the AFC South. That's it. CJ Stroud is in a cluster of guys tied after them. CJ needs to be on point. You'd expect Nico Collins to have a monster game, given what else the Texans have in their receiving core. I just don't see any reason to say, Joe Mixon, 112 yards and 2 touchdowns rushing, though in one game, you never know.
Yeah, I think they're going to struggle to run the ball. I'm just looking at last year because that's what we have to go off of. It was actually in 2024 when they played the Ravens last in the playoffs. Singletary, 9 carries for 22 yards, less than 2.5 yards a pop. But they did have some success throwing him the ball. He caught 5 passes for 48 yards. So especially with no Tank here, you're going to need somebody else to throw the ball to. That was something I complained about in the Chiefs game. They only threw the ball to Mixon 1 time. So I think you gotta throw the ball to your running backs. Nico's going to have his hands full because he's the top threat. So they're going to have a plan for him. The other thing, you're not going to have Mason, it looks like, at right guard. So it could be another struggle on the interior of your offensive line. I know he hadn't been great this year, but there's a reason he was starting and the backup was the backup. I think the other thing too, the flagship hit on this, and I went and looked into it. Robert Mays from The Athletic, the screen game for the Texans is the worst in the league. So our eyes are telling us exactly what the real numbers are telling us. The Bucs have the best screen game in the league. They have a positive 17.5 EPA on screens. Texans dead last at a negative 17.5 an EPA on screens. So, and you see it. They're just, even Tunsil, as good as he is, he's not good at blocking these plays. And the problem is it keeps setting CJ and the offense up for these 2nd and 3rd and longs over and over again because they're not working. So it just shows you that the Bobby Slowick, man, it's not just the play calling. He's not coaching this stuff upright. And then when they're not working, he's still doing it over and over again with no success. So I think it's going to be another tough day for Stroud. And Charlie's right. CJ has regressed this year, but he's not going anywhere. they need to find somebody that can get more out of CJ. And we've been over this. We don't expect any change to be happening. But if it doesn't happen, then you're just going to probably see these same results over and over again. Without Tank, it's going to be tough for them to score. So, I hate to be negative about this, but let's be real. I didn't think they were going to beat the Ravens in this game before the season started, when I had higher hopes about the Texans offense and the defense. The Ravens they seem to have the Texans number year after year after year. And they're a contender every year. They're a great team. So it's not the end of the world if they drop this game. You're still hosting a home playoff game. Maybe they can figure some things out here in the next few weeks and get the offense going.
To place a cherry on what seems to be a poop Sunday of discouragement, bah humbug. The Ravens are second in the NFL in sacks. Only the Denver Broncos have more. They have given up a bunch of yards. They do play from the lead a lot. So if teams have to throw the ball against them, but it also means a pass rush gets to tee off. So CJ Stroud, buckle that chin strap extra tight.
Before we get to predictions, I want to get your final X factors for Wednesday's game. And as always, we are interested in everyone's X factors, so make sure you tell us those in the comments. Charlie, what's your final X factor or X factors you'll be watching for during Ravens-Texans?
Maybe the Ravens are giddily unfocused at the prospect of catching Beyonce at halftime. The noon game is Chiefs-Steelers. Now, I don't know if John Harbaugh will bar any knowledge of the score, but if the Steelers win that game, that's a downer for the Ravens, because the Steelers control the division race if they win the last two games. They're both home games, but the Chiefs and then the Bengals, who certainly can score. If the Steelers lose to the Chiefs, the Ravens then know, well, if they beat the Texans and then they finish with the Browns, the division is theirs. And it's a big difference opening at home in the playoffs as opposed to coming on the road, although I don't think a 5 seed coming to Houston would be thinking, oh, no. But obviously, you'd rather be higher and have the home game. So the outcome of that game is significant. And as much as we've talked about it, and it just feels like where the Texans are right now, yeah, the Ravens, oh boy. Baltimore's not some superpower. If the Chiefs beat the Steelers and the Texans beat the Ravens, the Texans go win in Nashville. The Texans are the 3 seed, which we talked about moving up a slot higher. And if you win your first game and you get an upset, you could wind up with another home game in the division round if the 2 seed gets bumped off. I'm grasping a little for what's the X factor positively. But there are some of the scenarios that from a Texan standpoint, you can say, hey, you know what? It's not like hitting the Powerball if these come through.
Yeah, I think X factor, show us you can score some touchdowns against these guys. You're not going to beat the Ravens if you can't put it in the end zone. So that's why I bring back that playoff game. Maybe special teams, that's how they got on the board with the touchdown the last time they played each other. But, if we are looking for some positivity, I mean, the Ravens aren't perfect. They lost to the Raiders this year. They lost to the Browns this year. So they can be had on the right day. And they'll be on short rest too. So we'll see how it unfolds. But yeah, I just want to see the offense show me something this week, because it just looks like the same thing every Sunday for the most part, or Wednesday or Thursday or whichever day they happen to be.
Or Saturday.
Yeah.
I echoes Charlie's thoughts. For me, it's Nico. He's, I think, their only hope. He'll need to have the game of his career, or at least attract enough attention to create opportunities for others. So that's what I'll be watching for. And as we record this, the Texans are 4 to 4.5 point dogs, depending on the book. The point total as 46.5. And if you're watching this on YouTube, we want to know your score predictions, so put those in the comments. Josh, this week we start with you. Final score, Ravens-Texans.
I'm going to go Ravens 27, Texans 20.
My exact score and outcome. That's right. I'll double down. We'll happily be wrong together if it works that way. Hey, past performance, no guarantee of future results, especially in a different season. But the Ravens clocked the Texans to open 2023. They took them apart in the second half in the wild card round game, or the division round game last season. the Texans presently are not as good a team as they were going into that Ravens playoff game. Now, maybe Baltimore's not as good either, but the Ravens just strike me as the better bet. Care to make it unanimous, Brandon?
I do. Look, it's funny, though, that once again, Nico's the last man standing at the end of the season, as he was last year. I've tried to be optimistic all season, you guys know, but my 11-win prediction is on life support. And so this week I pull the plug. The Ravens are beatable, as Josh said, but not as vulnerable as the Texans are right now. This team has just been ravaged by injuries. I think the Ravens do put up a significant number on Houston, not because I don't believe in the defense, but just because I believe the offense won't be capable of keeping the defense off the field long enough to rest. So I'll just, cross my fingers that I'm wrong, but I'm going to go 30-19 Ravens. Hopefully we see a historic game out of CJ and he comes ready to dedicate a game to Tank. So we'll end it there. That's going to be it for this episode of Texans on Tap. We hope to see you back here live on YouTube Wednesday, Christmas night, following Ravens and Texans. Everyone's opened up their gifts, had a good day, had a lot of nog, and come back ready to talk some Texans with us. If you're an Astros fan, the three of us do an Astros podcast called Stone Cold Stros. That's on our other YouTube channel, Sports Map Houston. So make sure you subscribe there, as we are covering all of the free agency offseason activity. So we hope to be able to cover even more. Hopefully there's a lot more news coming down the pike. Make sure you're subscribed over there. And as for this show, come on back here, join in the conversation Wednesday after the game, and hopefully we're celebrating a Christmas Day miracle in the form of a Houston win. Until then, go Texans.